because we got to kick off our first session. So, good morning. My name is Lucinda, and welcome to day one of Intersekt 2025. So, I am the Venture Success Manager at Stone & Chalk, and I'll be your Stage 2 MC for today. So, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet at the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. This land is known as Naram and has been cared for by the First Nations people for tens of thousands of years and always was and always will be the Aboriginal land. I pay my deepest respect to the elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands people gathered here today. Now, before we kick off our first session on stage 2, a few housekeeping items. The toilets can be found on the corridor outside the atrium on the left. And in the rare case of an emergency, please follow the green exit signs in an orderly fashion and listen to the directions of the venue staff. So sessions today will be spread across 4 rooms. Stage 1 is just past the registration desk in the main foyer. Stage 2 is exactly where you are right now. The roundtable room will be to the left of the exhibition space, and roundtable 2 will be beside the registration desk. So we're going to kick off with our first panel discussion for today. So it's 2030, charting the next 5 years of the Australian open banking ecosystem. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful moderator today. This is Brenton Charnley, Head of Open Finance at Mastercard. So let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning. I feel like we have a big room and not many people in here, so I'm expecting, what time's the other room going to wrap up, Lucinda? 9:30. Okay. So it'll feel busier, but the important thing, we're all CDR nerds, so we can sit here and nerd out together. But how is exciting that open banking is the first thing on the agenda today, and thank you for joining. For those who heard the intro this morning from Rehan, today we get to release the 6th edition of the Australian Open Banking Ecosystem Report, published by FinTech Australia, supported by Mastercard and Open Finance ANZ, in collaboration with my co-founder, Jennifer Harrison. If you're not following Open Finance ANZ on LinkedIn, please do. It's where the news and insights come on open banking and open finance, or connect with Jennifer and I. And it's an important report this year because the 6th edition, 5 years into the CDR, we're talking about the future. In the last 5 years, we've really looked to the past and talked about where have we been, what needs to be fixed and what needs to be changed. And now we're setting a goal for the future. And that goal is for 5.4 million consumers, CDR businesses and consumers using open banking by 2030. That is 1 in 4 eligible Australians using open banking on a daily basis. It equates to about 3 to 4% in today's numbers. That's about 800,000 consumers that the ACCC published yesterday, or released in a roundtable that we're at yesterday. So we're getting close to 1 million consumers using the CDR. That's a big jump, 150% year on year, and 135% from the previous half. And so we also have a little bit of a change in the ecosystem. Previously, we were talking about accredited data recipients, the number of representatives. That has largely remained unchanged. It went from 197 to 200 CDR participants. But what has changed, the number of consents per participant has increased. In fact, it's doubled. It's gone from about 2,000 CDR consents per participant up to about 5,400. So what we're seeing is a change in the ecosystem where we're, instead of talking about the number of people who've got their driver's license to drive on the road, we're talking about what they're doing and how far they're going with it. So how do we get to this 2030 vision for the CDR? We need to look back first to do so. And looking back at Scott Farrell's Future Directions Report, Volume 1 and Volume 2, he talked about achieving the goal of confidence, choice and convenience for consumers. And importantly, that is not what the CDR is. That is what consumers will obtain from using the CDR. And so what we've done as part of the report, we've talked about some new fundamentals building on those foundations. That is, we want the CDR to be reliable. We need the CDR to be secure. We need the CDR to be simple, inclusive, valuable, and ultimately sustainable. And that last one's an important point to talk about because it's no longer about data holders and data recipients. We're talking about an ecosystem of participants. We're talking about consumers using it for a wide variety of use cases. And as part of the report, we also talked to some of the recommendations which the ACCC and Treasury will be consulting on very soon. We outlined 7 recommendations in our report to help achieve our vision. The first one is a streamlining of the nominated representatives, helping businesses participate in the CDR. A simplification of consents with the introduction of what we call a consumer disclosure consent. So simplifying the regime and the rules, removing the complexity and the barriers to entry. The third one is improving operational performance, making sure that it is reliable. The fourth is to see the government uptake CDR themselves. There's been an incredible number of use cases, particularly in the UK, seeing the government adopt open banking. In New Zealand, we've just seen the tax office in New Zealand release an RFI on using CDR for verification type use cases in New Zealand, for example. We need to make our transition on screen scraping. Importantly, it is a transition period, but one of the factors from the UK that did saw uptake was when there was a date set, there was a transition that was made by the industry over to their open banking. We need to go deeper before we go broader. Let's finish off what we're talking about and work on reliability to get there. And finally, we need to reduce some operational costs. And we talk about the nominated representatives and the CDC being important components to reducing the cost, particularly on government and the regulators. And before I welcome my wonderful panellists to the stage, I'd like to give a few thanks to the people who have got us to 5 years. I remember being on this stage 5 years ago with a different logo on my lapel, talking about open banking. And we're 5 years in, and I would have thought if 5 years ago, would we have thought we've almost got 1 million consumers and businesses using open banking to date? I suspect some people thought it should be about 5 million. Some people might think it would be a lot lower, but I think it's an incredible achievement. So to Dr. Scott Farrell, who's over here in the room, thank you for leading this piece of work back then and the Productivity Commission. To the contributors to the report this year, Dr. Bill Roberts from the UK has written a great foreword about the future. The UK is living our future and talking about it. Rehan, Shannon, Nick, Katrina, Jody, Mitch, Joyce, Russell and Jack across Mastercard and FinTech Australia. Thank you to all those who contributed to writing this fantastic report. And thank you to all those CDR nerds who keep going and have got the energy to keep on going and doing this today. To the first 10 participants, if you think back to that time, in particular to Gareth and Tony, to Rob Hale, who isn't with us today, but he's still living in Brisbane. When I say he's not with us, he is alive. He's not here nerding out on CDR. Maybe Rob is here, but to Jamie Leach and to F-Data, to Simeon, Jody Ross, Kate O'Rourke, Jess Robinson, to Claire and the Treasury team, thank you for keep on fighting the fight. To Anna now, for keep on working on the rules. Dan at WeMoney, thank you for keep on talking about the consumer and putting the consumer in the front of this. And I think Renette and the story of the CDR and how putting the big C of the consumer front and centre. To Rebecca and Simone Joyce at FinTech Australia at that time, Chair and CEO, who really spearheaded it. To Mr. Andrew Stevens, the Chair of DSAC, and now to Ian, Demir, Jill, Tim Poskett, the other aggregators in the market who have done an incredible job on getting us to here. And of course to many more of you, James, where's James? Architect of the CDR, there he is. Thank you as well for all your effort. So it's incredible time. You know, we are at the point where we're going to see significant usage, 150% year on year, and we hope that really accelerates. So with that background, I'd love to introduce my panellists to talk about different perspectives. So can I ask you to welcome my panellists to stage? Jason from Pocket Smith, Heidi from Better Regulation, Wade from Credit Sense, and Nick from NAB. Welcome. Hello. Ooh, better. Does this sound better? Does this sound better? Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining such an early morning, and welcome everyone. Please grab seats. There's even overflow where you can look at us backwards. So if I wave, can you wave that way? There we go. Hello everyone. Good morning. So here we are today talking about Heidi. We're going to go to you first and to talk about where we're at and how we can get there. We talk about those who read the Richards Review. Thank you for the incredible work that you did to, again, improve and support where we're going in our future. What do you what's your view of where we are today, and what do we need to do to, I guess, move forward into the future?
Yeah, well, thanks, Brenton. I guess my perspective is the CDR, it's a regulatory creation. And I think we're at the point now, 5 years on, where we need to move from being that regulatory mandate to something that's more of a self-sustaining ecosystem, where everybody has an incentive to participate. And we did, the original concept of the CDR was really quite a prescriptive, detailed regime, and I think there's scope to move it to be more principles-based and more aligned to kind of commercial realities. And I definitely support, I commend you to the new, what do we call it, the ecosystem report, which has, I think for the first time, some very concrete recommendations on things that we could change to make the system more principles-based and simpler. That may seem odd coming from a former regulator, but I do think, when you look around the world, Australia's kind of taken a different route to a lot of other countries in the level of detail and the level of prescription. So I think there is scope to simplify. I really believe we need to get the current regime working well before we look at expanding it to lots of other areas. Otherwise, we'll just kind of perpetuate the problems that we currently have. So I'll just point out a couple of areas, and these are in the report that you can read, but one is just making it more usable and user-friendly, and the other is looking at ways to cut back on costs to participants. On the usability front, we all love to talk about consents and why do we have this kind of over-engineered, it's very much sort of a belts and braces approach on consents, and then it's backed up by various privacy requirements, and you've got to click through lots of screens and read lots of fine print on your phone, and it's better than it was a few years ago. There's been some streamlining, but it's still I actually did it the other day, and then you compare it to just going into your banking app, and it's just still kind of worlds apart. And that actually requires, unfortunately, surgery to the CDR rules. Sorry, Treasury people, although I know they know this, just the red pen kind of thing. But it's doable, but it's just it's a bit of drafting work, and also getting comfortable that actually consumers don't really need to see who all of the outsourced service providers are when they consent, and they don't really need to be able to select different time periods, and maybe they could do that later. So consents, obviously, and the other one is just compliance costs, probably more for data holders because they're the mandated ones, but there it's really about trying to get over this whole change fatigue. And when I look at the number of changes to the rules and the data standards, it's kind of on a scale that's unlike anything I've seen in any other regulatory program. So to me, that's really just about can we get on a more predictable, sort of stable framework, so that if you're a big bank and you've got hundreds of products, every little, a little change to the CDR data item, it may not seem like very much, but when you think you've got to do that for hundreds of products, and you've got to get compliance sign-off and legal sign-off and IT sign-off and product governance. So I think there's just more of a focus on that when things are being prioritized. So maybe I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you, Heidi. Nick, should we come to you next? You lead open banking for the National Australia Bank, and you've lived and breathed every moment of every rule change and standard movement over the last iterations of the rules. One of the pillars we talked to is sustainability. So I'm keen to hear your view about that and your view of 2030 goal, and what do you think from a data holder's perspective is required for improvements?
Thanks, Brenton. Let's go. So the ambition is really large, 1 in 4 consumers using open banking, and that's fantastic. I think that we want to frame that ambition correctly. If we think about, are we going to have 1 in 4 consumers using a regulated data sharing scheme by 2030, it feels a bit distant. What I like to think about is, are we going to have 1 in 4 consumers sharing and accessing and living their digital lives using services that have been powered or led to innovation through a regulated data sharing regime? And when we think about that, from a customer's point of view, They don't get up and do consumer data writing. They don't want the acronym. They want the outcome. They want to do their banking, manage their energy, manage their businesses where they want it, and they want it to be safe. They want to be in control. And if we take the same approach and we don't only think about the consumer data right, the consumer data right doesn't have to be everything to everyone. We think about, well, how will this work with digital identity, with payments, with corporate data integrations? We can have a well-considered view about how can we simplify the consumer data right to be the right size and shape. And for me, this is how we start to make it sustainable. Heidi was on the money. We have probably the most complicated regime I've come across. We're up to version 35 of the standards in 5 years, which is impressive in some ways. But what we're wanting to do is understand how we can consider how these things work together to bring it back. And in terms of sustainability for us, we've talked about the move from really restrictive rule-based standards to having more policy-based and principle-based rules. This is fantastic. Allow all ecosystems to innovate and meet the intent of the rules. I think we want to listen to our consumers. We want to anchor the consumer data right on what they see as most important and what the most valuable use cases are. And what we see that is everyday use cases and everyday data. How can we bring the consumer data right back to focus on those so that we're reaching in giant leaps rather than small steps? And I think the third part is demystification. We talked about consumers don't know what the consumer data right is. How can we help them? Government, we completely agree. We want to see the government start to bring value to customers from being a data recipient themselves. But we also want to see them start to help to educate consumers about what the consumer data right. The biggest drop-off point is when customers are asked to share their data by logging in and they don't expect it. So if we're able to demystify and bring that back, we'll see usage jump forward. If we can get these foundations right of the consumer data right, the consumer data right becomes foundation for innovation. Today, it's sort of a ceiling. So doing those things, the 2030 vision becomes achievable and sustainable.
Thanks, Nick, and appreciate your lived experience. 35, eight kind of rule changes, 35 standard changes. It's a lot. So thank you to you and your team. Let's go to you, Jason, living and breathing the consumer around the world. Now, I really appreciate your perspective as a global fintech using open banking as a core component of empowering the household CFO, and that's me in my household. So I use all my spreadsheets. For you, how can open banking and CDR more broadly add value, and how do we move from like this early majority into the mass market for consumers?
One of the things I loved about the CDR summit was hearing Dr. Farrell and Dr. Opperman talk about open banking today and how it was similar to like the early days of Wi-Fi. And we all use Wi-Fi. It's transparent. It's easy to access. But when I reflect on my first experience with it back in 2003, it really explains why talking about open banking today at barbecues is kind of really hard for us nerds on the stage. Back then, I had to get a wireless router, plug it in, and a card, a PCMCIA card to slot into my laptop, screw in a little antenna, pop it up, and then I had to, there wasn't just a Wi-Fi switch up the top, I had to delve into the network settings to activate that to actually get magic internet over the air. And I was so excited about it, and I wanted to tell my friends, I'm like, hey, there's this new thing, in the future, very, very soon, you're going to be able to access the internet from anywhere in your house. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. But why though? I mean, why would we need this? My machine is just plugged into the wall. Am I just going to shift it over here? And of course, when you think about it, in 2003, this is a year before Facebook was founded. It's like 4 years before the iPhone was out. The cloud is actually a cumulonimbus thing that drops rain on your head. People weren't uploading photos to anywhere. So the context is so important. The infrastructure was there, but the ecosystem really wasn't. And so when I think about how we want to make the leap into the mainstream, there are three things really, and we've really talked about that, here. We can summarize it as trust, utility, and storytelling. So trust is table stakes. We've got to make sure that consents don't defeat people before they engage with the system. They need to know that the data is reliable, there's good fidelity, and that their data is not going to be compromised. Utility is all about how do we actually get people engaging with the tools that they want. What are the outcomes? So are they going to be managing their mortgages, tracking their finances, making payments easy? That's happening right now, which leads to the third part, which I think as fintech leaders we need to do much better at, which is storytelling around the CDR and open banking. And how do we actually talk about open banking as we don't even think about, we should stop talking about the pipes and start talking about the confidence and the outcomes. How do we actually bring out open banking as, what is the humanist approach towards using this technology? Why are people engaging with it? How are their lives getting better with it? And let's just keep focusing on that as opposed to the pipes. And that's how we're going to cross that chasm.
Thank you, Jason. And to you, Wade, and I think we've had 5 minutes taken off our time. I don't know, are we being penalised? Scoreboard. You're the CTO at Credit Sense, and you've lived and breathed open banking in its broadest sense for some time and continue to do. You're looking at this transition as CDR, but you've been providing connectivity to consumers to power a broad range of use cases for some time. And we talk about reliability in the port as a key perspective for sharing data, and you've just talked about trust, Jason. What do you think about this transition period from scraping or alternative data, digital data capture methods, and are we there yet on the reliability for a viable alternative?
Thanks, Brenton. I think that the first and foremost, CDR needs to provide value that's equal to or above existing technologies. And where the current state of it is at, that's a hard sell. So let me pitch this to you. We've got a new technology. It's probably going to cost you an arm and a leg for you to get it across from a compliance perspective. We'll probably give you a lower completion rate, and there might be some data issues around that as well. And fundamentally, the data you're already getting, that bank data, there's not really much of a difference in what you get through CDR. So that's a hard sell. All right, so we need to change something around here to drive that adoption. So what is that change? So I believe that the biggest change there is about removing the barrier to enter. So we want to be able to enable lenders and brokers to easily access and use CDR alongside their existing technologies. And that provides a transition across to CDR. So what's the value that provides there? First and foremost, there's an immediate uplift. So there's already existing current data holders that provide better connectivity and outcomes than existing consented scraping sort of methods. So by allowing the access to the CDR alongside their existing technology, we can provide that uplift, and that uplift provides a competitive edge in the market, and that's what's going to drive more broader adoption across the industry. The other aspect that opens up to is it gives a much better way of comparing at a data holder level the value and the disadvantages that may exist. And so coming back to the point of 35 changes, what we want to sort of be able to drive there is what are those changes that are needed to drive that success rate sort of up. And that there fundamentally will drive that adoption. It will give us a way that we can transition across through to getting more and more across on CDR and driving that value, and that will drive towards that overall sort of 2030 vision.
Was there any last minute comments from the panel onto these? Because I appreciate we've got through one question each. We've got a minute and a half to go. Does anyone want to add any special comments to the end?
Perhaps I'll just add to your last point. I think the data within the consumer data, right? Customer transactional data, that is the gold seam that we're trying to enable customers to share and connect. And the focus there doesn't need to be, do we need more? Do we need higher fidelity? We need it to be reliable, and then we need it to be accessible. I think the accessible part is really important for your customers and obviously consumers. And simplification to allow us to anchor on solving that is going to help drive uptake as much as any other fiddling that occurs.
I think just to that as well, one of the difficulties here is that we've got authentication that's happening across at the data holders, and then we've got the journey starting back at the data recipient side where they're getting the consent, and it starts even before that at the lender where they're actually going and saying, hey, this is what we need you to do to get an outcome. And then after the data holder, it's got to come back through the flow and feedback through there. And so that simplifying of that and understanding that each of those parts by themselves can't drive the outcome. It needs to work together across there to drive the best outcome across it. And I think that's the biggest thing that sort of is going to help the value.
Heidi, Jason, any last minute remarks?
Yeah, look, I was just going to add that I think over the last few years people may have observed something of a kind of divergence between the data holder community and the data recipient or FinTech community. And I think we're at the point now where, the industry needs to get behind a small number of things that can be done to kind of push the CDR along. Maybe those are the things in your report, Brenton, but I think from people I talk to, everybody's actually really quite aligned on what needs to be done. So some of it is, can we send a clear message to the policymakers about those few things that would really move things forward?
Jason, any?
Well, I'd love to understand what some of those measures of success actually are for us in the FinTech community. So we're looking at 800K people now. We're looking for 5.4 million as a target for 2030. But what are some of those material outcomes that we can bind together and demonstrate to the public that this is a working thing? Is it numbers? Is it cost savings? Is it user experience? I think that over the next 5 years, it's absolutely worth determining so we can all get in behind.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'd want to leave you with one last quote that we referenced in the report, which is one of my favourites, which is by William Gibson, and he says, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And I think we live that all in our technology lives every day, with AI that's coming to us, Wi-Fi back in 2003, explaining to your parents how to use an iPhone, that's always fun. And hopefully we can go to a barbecue and people don't ask me, what do you do for a job, Brenton? And it's just what happened. So if you want to download the report, go to openbankingecosystemmap.com, a great SEO website. Whoever came up with that one, that was me. And so please do enjoy, and please join me in thanking our wonderful panel.
There we go, you can leave me on the seat, it's okay. Thank you so much, Brenton.